as I was saying, people have asked, why are we having this dialogue? In our politically correct age, when everyone likes to play victims, we think it's important to actually talk with one another and to hear each other out. Grant Palmer was raised in the LDS Church and served for most of his life in the church education system. After his retirement, he wrote a book about issues in LDS history called Insider's Look at Mormon Origins. And as a consequence of some of the issues that he raised in that book, he was disfellowshipped from the LDS Church. When he inquired as to what remedy was expected and was told that it would require him to repudiate each chapter of his book, he resigned his membership. It's been my privilege to interview him several times on the Ancient Past, which used to air on TV 20 here in Salt Lake City. He has some wonderful interviews. He actually volunteered for this, and so we're very grateful for the privilege of having him with us here this evening. We also have with us Mr. Alan Allred. He is an instructor at the LDS Institute here at the University of Utah. It's been my privilege to interview him about a dozen times or more over the years. This is the first time, though, that we've had both men together. So we have basically a former Institute instructor and a current Institute instructor. Alma has taught church history mostly in the past. He's now teaching New Testament. I'm the pastor of Christ Presbyterian Church. We are a congregation of the Orthodox Presbyterian denomination. The significance of that this evening, for those who have questions about why we've been having this dialogue, is that in the LDS Scriptures, in the Pearl of Great Price, it specifically says that Presbyterianism is not true. When Joseph Smith is recounting his first vision, he claimed that he was told that he should join none of the existing churches because they were all wrong. All their professors were corrupt, all their creeds were an abomination to God. Just a few sentences later, Presbyterians are singled out. He tells his mother, "I have learned for myself that Presbyterianism is not true." As a Presbyterian pastor, I believe it is true, and that Joseph Smith is the one who is not true. It has been a privilege to dialogue in the past with Alma Allred on these issues. Most of those are up on YouTube, and we would point you towards that, and he has been very gracious to join us here this evening. We still hold to the Westminster Confession of Faith, which is word for word the same as it was in the 1820s and the 1720s, and on back, but it is the same statement of faith that was called an abomination. We do not label LDS anti-Presbyterians or Presbyterian bashers, but we're making a truth claim. So are the LDS. The point of having this dialogue is to talk about those truth claims in a respectful manner. We're going to have basically an informal dialogue. We're going to do this for about an hour. We're going to take a short break for restrooms. If you didn't notice when you came in, they're just inside the doors on the north side. We'll be regathering. We'll be taking questions from you. They need to be in writing, though, because we don't have microphones and everything else. But if you have questions, write them down, give them to me during the break. I'll take them up also right at the end, and we'll have questions for each person. Try to make them concise. Try to make sure they're dealing with the question at hand this evening, or else they won't get asked. And please identify to whom you wish the question asked. So we have with us Grant Palmer and Alma Allred. And so we're going to talk tonight about Joseph Smith as prophet, particularly the news that has been out there in terms of his money digging and seer stones. So I'm going to start with Alan. The latest issue of the Insight, which is a copy of, has information about, there's nothing really new in it, but it's talking about the new talk about Seer's films and Joseph Smith's history. What's your perspective in terms of what's been released?
I think most that I know that's been released is the photograph of the Seer's film that Joseph Smith had primarily to be used. There have been descriptions of it from, I guess, since the early days of the church. It was chocolate colored about the size of the hen's egg. Now they've released a photo of it.
It seems to have come as a revelation to a lot of folks that Joseph Smith had used a seer stone rather than spectacles to translate the Book of Mormon, and that in the Insight article it mentions some of the things that many people I've spoken with in the past didn't know, which was that Joseph Smith would actually put a seer stone into his hat and then pull it up around his face. From your perspective, is that news?
It isn't to me. I never shied away from that when I taught church history. I remember about probably about 35 years ago, I was walking across, I guess, the South Temple. I happened to be walking with Bruce Armstrong, and I had been reading about the Seer stone, and I said, "Are you troubled with that?" And he said, "No." "Are you?" I said, "No." We were both cognizant of the fact that Joseph Smith used the Seer stone. I think the church hasn't gone out of its way to point it out. I think there's enough historical references to it. It shouldn't be problematic. I think some people may be ignorant of it. I think that if they are, it's their fault. I mean, I found it on my own long before I was an institute teacher.
Now, Greg, discussion of the use of the seer stone in the translation of the Book of Mormon, discussion of that actually got you in trouble years ago, didn't it?
Yes, it's quite a few years ago. It was 1985. Sorry for my voice, I'm kind of losing it. In my classroom, I had a question box, and every other Friday I would answer questions of what were on what was on the students' minds. And this was during the time of the Hoffman newspaper, all those problems. And one student asked if our current Book of Mormon was translated, that Joseph Smith translated using gold plates. I says, no, I don't think so. I says, I think he did it with a stone in the hand. And an hour later, this student's mother was going to see the principal. And 2 days later, I was in the church office building. And they were putting me on probation for a year. They didn't tell me that right away, but they did make comment. This was a principal, his supervisor, and a zone administrator. And all three of them had never heard anything about the use of the seer stone in translating the Book of Mormon. And then, like I said, they put me on probation because of it. We were there about an hour and a half, and I'd say about close to an hour was on the stone, and they would say things like, well, I've never seen a stone in a hat in Ensign magazine. And another would say, well, I've never heard a general authority talk about it. Now, it's true that B.H. Rogers had said something in what we used to call the comprehensive history of the church, but it just shows the general ignorance of it, and I came out of there kind of frustrated. And I was on probation for a year, and I just, I never taught this in the classroom, but it was a question, and I addressed it. It was the time we talked. So I said to one of our senior senior Joseph W. Smith Institute professors, I says, I felt really frustrated. I says, on a scale of 1 to 10, I think all three of those, my superiors, at about a level 3 of understanding. He says, oh, I think you're way too generous. And suggested that they had a 3 on a scale of 10. And so my experience is a little different than Alan's. I too knew about it, but I was surprised how so many of my colleagues did not know about it. And there's still many people in the church that have not known about this.
And when you were actually meeting with leaders in the church about needing this fellowship, of the people who were there, how many of them actually were aware of the use of the Seer stone?
Well, they have the stake presidency and high council and a couple of alternatives. And it's a fairly affluent stake out in Will Creek. And during 6-hour court, I had 20 minutes to speak. And I took a picture out of Insider's View of one of the origins, and I blew it up and I passed it around. And I said, how many of you are aware that this was how the current Book of Mormon was produced? And no one of those 18 men knew. There was one person who did raise his hand, but he admitted he had read my book the week before. But that was it. And these are men that are well educated, Harvard graduates, successful business people, and yet none of them knew about this. And I simply said during my 20 minutes, I says, we can sit here for 2 hours every Sunday morning for about 3 months and talk about issues like this. But someone high up in the church has decided they do not want this stone in the hat image made known. Even in this current article that's in this month's Ensign, they still don't have a picture of a stone in the hat. I asked the church for if they would allow me a picture of the stone in the archives, because I'd seen the stone almost 50 years ago in June. 50 years ago, and I wrote a notice about it. So I knew about it, but anyway, lost my trend. But
Sorry.
gone.
I'm younger than you, and I do it every day. So.
I'm coming back from jet lag.
Now you're.
I don't want to be uncharitable, but I find your comments not as credible as I would like them to be. About 8 years ago, we had a reception at the Institute of Religion. It was Christmas time, and one of the secretaries there's husband is a craftsman, and he has made his own set of gold plates based on the witness accounts of it. And he's made his own liana. He's made a Urim Thummim, a breastplate, and I think he donated the first gold plates that he had to the church because they're pretty striking. It took me a while to put them together. They didn't make them out of gold, but they look pretty good. And the Institute asked him to bring his artifacts there for a display for the Institute teachers for our annual Christmas luncheon. And he laid them all out, and there were the Urim Thummim, the liana, the gold plates, and then he had a rock in it. And we got a good kick out of that. I mean, we've done that about 8 years ago. We all thought that was entertaining. I mean, there wasn't anybody there that was surprised why he had the hat and the stone.
I don't know. My own experience, I'm an outsider. Whenever I brought these things up with LDS, this is not exactly the first thing I started with, of course, but I can only think of a handful over the 20 plus years who've ever even heard that there was a hat in the Seer stone. So it may not be as well known as your experience, but it's now indisputed that the Seer stone was actually dug up by Wilbur Chase, correct?
Well, it was in, I think, dug up by Joseph Smith, but he will chase as well.
And then borrowed by him to basically pursue treasure digging activities, right?
Those are some of the accounts.
Okay, so this is just trying to be clear here. This is not disputed history that Joseph Smith was involved in treasure digging and using this stone in that process, right?
I'm not sure that is in dispute. I know there are a lot of claims of that fact, but all sources aren't of equal validity. My own skeptical nature says that if Joseph Smith really claimed to be able to find treasure, the first thing people would have said was, go find some treasure and then come help us. It seemed kind of foolish for people to say, oh, you can find treasure, well, help me find some treasure, and they're paying for it. Even the critical accounts of the Bainbridge trial all say that Joseph Smith never offered his services as a seer to find the place.
And didn't Martin Harrison admit that Joseph would use the stone to try to, he found a pin, haystack, or not haystack, but some straw.
But that's different than finding a hoard of money, which obviously he never had.
But weren't there a lot of people at that time? I mean, didn't Washington Irving write a book about, write a story about money diggers? I mean, wasn't it actually a fairly popular folk magic kind of activity? I mean, and were any of them really finding treasure?
Not that I'm aware of.
But there were a lot of people doing it, right?
Yeah, a lot of people were digging for treasure. I know people that dig for treasure today.
So, Grant, your perspective, Joseph Smith finds a seer stone. What does he use it for transmitting the book?
Well, I think he's used it for treasure digging. Josiah Stoll, who hired him based on his Syriac abilities, according to Joseph's mother. Joseph's not just another shovel. He claims to be able to see treasure. And so that's his role in this. And he is digging for treasure. There's many examples of that, but he's hiring himself out to make a little money. That's what it says in the 1826 court trial that he's involved in. One of the witnesses is named Addison Austin. And Austin asked him, he says, can you really see anything in that stone? He says, no, but I do it to make a little money. So they're hiring him not because he can dig with a shovel, he was strong, but because he has Syriac powers. At least that's what he's claiming he has. So there's no question about that. My research and the evidence is quite overwhelming.
Didn't his mother describe his activities in terms of searching for treasure, that he was trying to earn the amulet, I'm sure pronunciation, the habit, and things like this? I mean, wasn't there a folk magic element of this?
Well, the whole family was involved in this, but you can overdo that. It's not like they did this full time.
I'm sorry, that sounds so strange. It's not like they did it full time.
Well, some people kind of indicate that's all they did.
Yeah, that they were lazy and shiftless.
Well, I'd be lazy too if I didn't own the property. I wouldn't keep it up as well.
I would suggest that Joseph Smith put in an honest day's labor as a shoveler with a lot of other people. His brothers were hired out consistently to be laborers.
But when it became treasure digging, it was his special claim that he had the power to see these treasures. And as you pointed out, he never found anything of value. We have two sources, for example, through his seer stone or his stone. He sees Captain William Kidd going down the Susquehanna River. And he also sees Captain Kidd carved on a rock exactly where that treasure was located, and yet he never gets any of this treasure. This went on often enough that the local Palmyra, Manchester people paid very little attention to Joseph when he started talking about a set of golden plates and an angel. It already burned his credibility.
So now, do you challenge that he was doing more than just digging? I mean, were you saying?
No, I think he was a money digger. I mean, he admits that himself in a frequently asked questions announcement.
So he is claiming that he can. Martin Harris talks about him looking for treasure, looking to have to his face, using the same method he ultimately uses in translating the Book of Mormon. So this is an undisputed thing now, right? Because I know when Bishop Tuttle brought this up 100 years ago, there were a lot of folks who said there's no evidence of it, and then even when Wesley Walters found the documentation from the Bainbridge trial in 1826, Presbyterian pastor. But I mean, Wesley Walters was.
You got stolen records out of the courthouse?
We won't skip over that.
Oh, okay.
But no, he actually left the mainland and joined the PCA before he died. But there are.
I'd like to pause with that. When you say, Tuttle, they were saying there was no evidence, I think you can conflate a lot of circumstances together. Bishop Tuttle, his assistant or secretary, I'm not exactly sure what her exact role was, claimed to have had notes from the trial. And they published those notes, and people said, we would like to see evidence of those notes. They were never submitted. They were never offered as proof. All that was ever offered was, we have the notes. When you say, people were saying there's no evidence, I'd still say there's no evidence that they ever actually had those documents. I think if they had it, they would present it.
But the substance is now disputed because of Wesley Walters' discovery of the.
Well, the substance is indisputable as of 1835, when Oliver Catholic said that there was a trial in 1826 in Bainbridge. I don't think there's a question about that.
So, what's your perspective of Joseph Smith during this time? I mean, is he a fraud? I mean, he's claiming that he's seen treasures in the earth.
Well, I think that's what we go back to is all sources aren't as valid as others. You mentioned the supposed
Captain Kidd?
No, not the one that he supposedly admitted that he was a fraudster. He was just trying to make a little money. I don't buy that. And I don't think that's a legitimate source. There are a lot of sources everywhere.
It was authored under court oath twice. You don't buy it.
People lie.
Okay, but it's not just those two. There's 5 statements that Joseph Smith is told. He tells them that he can't see anything in his stone. Nothing. Nada. Zip.
Okay. But let's hear the.
Well, like I'm saying, it depends on the source that you talk about. You said there's 5 statements. It depends on which account of the Bainbridge trial you talk about. Some of them say there were 7 witnesses. Some of them say there were 4 witnesses.
I'm not talking about the Bainbridge trial. I'm just talking about statements in general. When Isaac Hale Joseph comes down, he's going to offer him a place if he'll give up his money digging. And Al Hale, his son is there, and Peter Ingersoll, whose property was adjacent to the Smith's home. Joseph got married January 27, and now Ingersoll is in Palmyra, going down to get Emma's furniture to bring them back. All 3 of them heard Joseph say at the same time that he could not see anything in his stone.
All of them claimed to have heard that.
They all swore out individual affidavits.
Yeah, and I've seen
Well,
all
I'm
the
saying-
I've seen all the sworn affidavits from Hurlbert's book. People do lie.
These appeared in the Susquehanna Register.
I've seen stuff on the internet. It's well good.
You know, it doesn't matter if you think he lied. Each person has to evaluate these statements for themselves, but we have two statements by Addison Austin under Bordeaux saying that Joseph said to him he couldn't see one thing in that stone. And you have three others who heard him at the same time say that he couldn't see anything in the stone. Now you can dismiss that and you can say they're lying. Each person has to evaluate that for themselves.
Greg, let me deal with sort of the elephant in the room here. The dispute is whether he ever admitted that he wasn't seeing things.
I think the dispute is bigger than that.
I want to shift the ground a little bit. The only alternative I see is he was seeing things in there, but was he seeing reality? Because as you admitted, he never found any treasure, did he?
No.
But he was claiming to find treasure.
Yes, he was claiming to be able to see things. Martin Harris said, yeah, he did find things that I had lost.
He found a pen that dropped out of his teeth.
Yes. But when you read the account, he says he put the stone in his hat, covered up his hat, his face, and reached out without looking anywhere else, picked it out. I think the elephant in the room is not whether or not he could see things in the stone, but whether or not he could be a prophet and still have made a mistake. Let's say he was dishonest in that room. Would that necessarily disqualify him as being a prophet? And I'm saying no one is perfect. And if you look at the history of prophets, some of them made a lot bigger mistakes than that. And so I even concede, let's say, if I were to concede that, yeah, Joseph Smith started out his prophetic career misusing a gift that he had, would that disqualify him as a prophet? I don't think it did.
Sure. I respond to that.
I want to come back to you in just a second, but to give you an idea of my concern with that, that's what I want to kind of flesh out some here. There's a difference between Moses killing an Egyptian and fleeing into the wilderness, David committing adultery and murder, and Joseph Smith claiming to receive spiritual revelation through a stone in his hand, saying he's seeing treasure and he never finds any treasure, but then using the exact same method to supposedly translate the place. But I don't know where
you're seeing the difference between that and committing murder is the scale of justice goes against Joseph on this.
Well, no, there's a difference between Joseph Smith claiming he's receiving divine or spiritual revelation in both circumstances versus an act of that is part of just a fall of humanity. Moses is not presenting himself as a prophet of God or receiving divine revelation when he kills the Egyptian. He just he gets mad.
I think you're taking an assumption that probably isn't consistent with the New Testament, because the author of Hebrews tells us that he left Egypt because of his testimony of Christ. And there are some manuscripts that say that, having faith, he killed the Egyptian and fled Egypt.
Challenge him. I don't know. Textual criticism would be an issue for the evening, but no, he identified his faith is identifying the people of God. He counts the suffering with the people of God greater riches than the riches of Egypt, and that's not the same as killing the Egyptian. But anyway, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. Grant, I want to come back to you.
I want to make a comment.
Sure, go ahead.
Moses slew an Egyptian before he was a prophet of God. St. Paul said he set out to destroy the church of God in Galatians. And he held the cloak of Stephen before, and he consented to his death. This was before St. Paul was a prophet of God. Paul then went on to a very illustrious career. Moses went on to a very illustrious career. King David, he was not a prophet. He did some terrible things. He paid for them, his family. Nathan was the prophet. So, and David repented, according to 1 Samuel. What I see with Joseph Smith is, yes, he starts out small. This is not a big deal. All prophets have flaws. But we're talking about the further Joseph Smith goes, and from 42 to 44, he's committing major felonies. These aren't just made mistakes. These are conspiracy to commit murder. This is conspiracy to commit treason. This is major counterfeiting in Nauvoo. This is serial bigamy, marrying his followers' wives, 30 to 40 of them. This is setting up a theocratic political government within the U.S. government. This is organizing Indians and trying to overthrow the United States government. Now, he never did that, but he planned to do that. And these Council of 50 Minutes, I think, are going to show us that they're finally going to release will show us some of that. But my point here is that Joseph does his shenanigans or scoundrel activities after he's a prophet, and they're not just minor things, they're huge things. Whereas Paul and Moses, they do this before they're called as prophets, and I think it shows how gracious God can be, that men can do these kind of things and yet still be called as prophets. Yet, when you go on about Jacob's greedy nature and his business practices, or Peter denying Jesus, these are small things to me because they go on to become very illustrious and powerful prophets of God. But I see it a very different concept here than Alan was suggesting.
So let me bring our focus back to, I think that we've covered a lot of material there that we don't have time to cover tonight. Joseph Smith was a money digger. He never found the treasure. One of the things that's striking to me as an outsider is in some of the affidavits that you find in Herbert, you find descriptions of Joseph trying to bind spirits, that the treasures would be drawn deeper into the earth. And when I read the Book of Mormon, it sounds like it's saying similar types of things about the treasures of
becoming slippery.
Becoming slippery, and the Gadianton, pronouncing. I have to make sure I'm pronouncing things correctly. The Gadianton thieves buried their treasure but couldn't get it back because it became slippery. Are those talking about different things in your perspective, or are they talking about the same kind of things?
They are. I think if you look at it in a perspective of a land filled with robbers and thieves, it's hard to put anything down and be able to find it the next day because someone will steal it. I think that's the way that it's slippery.
But you find the same language, don't you, in the book?
Find similar language, but I don't think you find the same language.
Do you believe the accounts of Joseph Smith's neighbors who describe him seeing with the stone was a 9-foot tall Indian, I think, in one place, and there are two Indians that one had killed the other, one had been buried with the treasure, and he would draw circles on the ground to try to bind the demons from pulling the treasure deeper because it was becoming slippery.
Yeah, I think that's kind of fantastical. What happens is you don't find that same kind of behavior, logical inconsistencies in Joseph Smith's life in 1832, 33, 34, 35. He's not dealing with that, but you're getting these affidavits that, oh yeah, this is what he did. One of them from the 1826 trial said that he said they had to sacrifice a sheep and get some blood in the ground. I think it takes a lot of credibility to swallow the stuff, particularly when that was not his method of operation in leading the church.
But would you challenge that up to the day he died, he was wearing a Jupiter talisman?
No.
So I mean, he's still involved in folk magic. He's still involved in talismans and things like this. And yet,
Actually, let me back up. I would challenge it. There is no evidence other than the son of Didymus that Joseph Smith had it on his person when he died. He wasn't wearing it. I know what happened is Michael Quinn knew that it wasn't in his pocket, and that's what the original claim was, is that the talisman was in his pocket. Michael Quinn concluded, well, if it wasn't in his pocket, it had to be around his neck, and therefore he was wearing it. So yeah, I would challenge it.
but
Comment.
yeah, let's try to keep.
I think we're getting away from the material point here. In Joseph Smith's 1826 trial, there's a man named Jonathan Thompson who testifies for the defense for Joseph Smith.
And I pause to say it was not a trial hearing.
A preliminary hearing, okay. But he was found guilty in that preliminary hearing.
You can't be found guilty in a preliminary hearing.
What's the word that's used? It's bound over to a series of 3 judges. Let me make my point.
Well, you can make your point, but you can't build a point off of several falsehoods.
Well, the point is not the trial. The point is that Jonathan Thompson believes Joseph Smith can see 2 Indians 30 feet below his feet. And he's guarding a trunk. And Joseph Sr. can say, there goes the guy in a cave who's being carried by bears. And Joseph says, yeah, he's a king. Or someone who's 9 foot tall scares them away from the treasure. Or charging horsemen scares them away from another treasure. These go on, or the hill opens up, and they see a room full of records in Cumorah. Now, you can dismiss all of these sources as hearsay, but we're talking about Oliver Cowdery, Brigham Young, Joseph Smith Sr., Joseph Smith Jr., Martin Harris.
You can go on and on, but what you're doing is you're conflating the accounts of Thompson in the trial with later accounts by Brigham Young. I don't question.
No, they're 2 different incidents. When Joseph Smith goes back to the hill opens up.
I'm familiar with that.
That's very different from what Jonathan Thompson's talking about, seeing 2 Indians guarding a truck.
What you did is you told both of those stories and then said, and these are all validated by Brigham Young, by Oliver Cowdery. Those aren't validated by Brigham Young and Oliver Cowdery. Only the account of the Hill of Cumorah.
Let me make my point. He uses the same stone to see all this stuff as he does to translate the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, can I respond to that?
In a minute. If your children persistently said they saw those kinds of things, you'd probably take them to the doctor.
Okay.
Yeah.
You said he uses the same stone for all of these instances.
I don't know, but he's using a stone.
Okay, let's go to the account of Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery returning the gold plates, the Urim and Thummim. You weren't using the stone there. There's no reference anywhere of stone.
That's right, because I don't think
That's
Joseph...
what you said. You said he uses the same stone for all of these instances. And you gave 2 instances, and only one of them, which I think is disputed, uses a stone.
Well, I only gave 2 or 3, but there's 8 or 9 that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
But the point is, whether he used that stone or not, he's using the vernacular of that era was second sight. And second sight, let's do an experiment. Martin Harris says he saw the golden plates like he saw a city through a mountain. All of you close your eyes and picture Las Vegas right now. That's second sight. The scriptural phrase for that is the eyes of our understanding were opened. It's the same thing. You see it in section 110, very first verse.
Let me respond to that. Because in that one interview, he said, so you did not see it. You did not see a physical plague. And he said, do you see my hand here? He said, as surely as you see my hand, I saw the plagues. So Martin Harris can say, I saw with my spiritual eyes, but he didn't disregard that as being an actual view.
All I know is if you read this book, in Sutter's View of Mormon Origin, you'll find 15, 20 examples of seeing things by second sight, the eye of faith, the spiritual eye. And I think this is how the witnesses are seeing the Book of Mormon plays. It's also how Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon are seeing a series of visions in section 76. The eyes of our understanding were open. That means you see in the mind. It means you close your eyes and you picture Las Vegas or Timbuktu at night. It's the same way in section 110 when Joseph and Oliver Cowdery see Jesus and Moses and Elias and Elijah.
Is it also the same way that Paul saw Jesus on the road to Damascus?
I don't think you know that.
Do you know what you just said?
Yeah, because it's in the scriptures. It's section 110, verse 1.
But what I'm saying
It's in 76, verse 12 and
the fact
19.
that Paul saw Jesus on the road to Damascus and nobody around him did, kind of suggests that what you're saying about second sight is actually a legitimate scriptural principle.
I'd like to bring this back.
Whether it's through the stone or second sight, this is how they're seeing these events. That's how they feel inside. And Brigham Young says Joseph was the leader of this. He taught the people this. Have you ever wondered why there's so many spiritual dedication, spiritual experiences that occurred in the temple? One person says, the eyes of our understanding opened. We saw convoy after convoy of angels, all by the eyes of our understanding. This is a scripture construct. And you really can't understand early church history unless you understand the second sight, key of understanding, when it comes to the spiritual and physical things. And Joseph is seeing things either through his stone, or honestly, I don't think he can see anything in the stone, but he's telling these people who already believe he can see treasure in the stone, that he can see things in the stone. When he gets to Ohio, he's dealing with converts coming out of organized churches, and he doesn't talk about the stone. He doesn't mention it.
In fact, there's probably a pretty good reason, because there's no instance of Joseph Smith ever using the stone after April 6, 1830.
Yeah, because they don't believe in it. In New York, they believe in it.
That's your conclusion. My conclusion is that he didn't need it.
Name one convert in New York that doesn't have this mindset. All the Whitmer clan is into this. The Knight clan is into this. The Smith clan is into this.
Iron Pages, yeah. A lot of people are.
The Rockwells are into this. So he's telling them you can see in the stone, and I don't think he can.
And he claimed to have seen the translation in the stone. That's how he translated the Book of Mormon. There's no question about that. Even the inside.
The question has been asked, is this going to be available on the internet? And Lord willing, it will be as soon as we get our copies and hold them up to Layton and have our fellow who's volunteered to help us edit them all together and then put it on the internet. So, Lord willing, in a few days. If you want to see that, our YouTube channel for our past TV shows, I think a couple of our debates as well. Ancient Paths TV, that's P-A-T-H-S, Paths, Ancient Paths TV, or you can go to our website, gospelutah.org.
And Jason, it will soon be on Mormon Think, Grant Homer page. Should be there soon.
All right. Sorry, Brad.
Since the stone's up there, just make a comment on it. Right near Robin Jensen, who works at the church historical department. I've had numerous people say, well, this stone you saw 50 years ago with the Earl Wilson showed 13, a dozen of us in 1311. what did it look like? Well, I wrote down some things. So when this came out, I only saw one side of it. When you look at the Joseph Smith papers, you'll find three sides of that stone. It has more streaks running through it. That's the side I saw. But then Robin Jensen says, another little problem is the photographer admitted to us this week that he put too much yellow in the photograph. And it should be more whitish, which conforms more with what I saw almost 50 years ago when the first presidencies. So that was a little bit too yellow. If you want to see better photographs, you'll have to go down to the church museum, and there you'll see a more accurate depiction of it. And I asked Robin Jensen why they didn't just do it right in the first place. He says, well, these photographs were done months ago, all ready to go. I understand that, but it just creates a little bit of problem. Just a bit.
Having processed a lot of photos, a lot of times to try to get the texture in, you've got to add some of the chromatic resolution and that. I've had some photos where I ended up with too much yellow and not enough white.
And that's what's happened here. And it's the size of the stone is correct, the darkness of the stone is correct. And just one stone. Yeah, how do you carry?
I'm still trying to figure out running with the plates, but having that in your pocket. Anyway,
actually, I have to bring it back. I mentioned the fellow that made the set of plates. He calculated what the plates would weigh based on what he had. He made them out of brass and took the difference from what it would have been if it had been solid gold and added lead in the seal portion so that it would balance out what would be a solid gold. But he also found out that it wouldn't work if it was solid gold, that it's more likely to bog up the copper element. So, and he let me take his plates to my class, and I would let people pass them around the class. I can run them. But not easily, but I can run them.
I understand. I understand that Tupac is a rather recent method that's been found. I'm not positive about this one, but it's very questionable whether the ancients stumbled on Tupac.
Well, there is Tupac in Central America.
But it hasn't been found until more recent times.
The reason he decided that there had to be some copper in this because he tried to, he hammered out some gold and he tried to write on the characters. And he said the gold was so soft that anything he wrote showed up on the other side. But if you put a mixture of copper with it, you could etch it with acid, and you could write on both sides of the plate. So his conclusion was that it was extra.
It's too bad Joseph Smith didn't use it. Nephi's in theology.
Let's come back. Before we move on to the Book of Mormon, in the translation of that, I wanted to be clear. I believe I've seen some references. I'll try to look them up. I couldn't pull anything up on my phone in a few minutes, but one reference that Grant found was of Pratt. Was it Orson or Park? It was Orson. Orson Pratt, who you would accept as friendly to one of the 12.
Yeah, what does it say?
He tells Orson Pratt this, and
He tells Orson Pratt? Who tells?
Joseph Smith. It's in the Millennial Star. It says that within Cumorah, quote, numerous records of the ancient nations of the Western continent was located and under the charge of holy angels. Well, Cumorah is a drummer. We won't get into what that is, but there's no lacuna in there. And Joseph also told Orson Pratt there are various rooms within Cumorah. Anyway,
Yeah, I'm familiar with both those citations. They're not talking about wealth.
But he was seeing things that would you say that you admit he was seeing them And are they there? And if they aren't there, why isn't the LDS Church?
Let me see if I can make a corollary.
Because the LDS Church owns the Oak Morning, right?
I don't believe there was a replacement there, but I do believe that they saw it.
Who saw them?
So was he seeing?
So I believe that they walked in and they were able to. I'd have to think of a corollary.
Does that sound like second sight to you?
Actually, I think that is more than second sight. If you look at, say Isaiah, Isaiah saw the throne of God. He saw God on the throne, and he saw all the angels. And I think if there were people standing next to him, they wouldn't have seen the same.
But we don't know that.
Of course, we don't know that.
Joseph Smith is in the Kirtland Temple, and he has those pulpits there, and they draw it, and he says, we saw Christ behind that. I don't think he saw him at all. The second sight doesn't see, it perceives. That's a very important distinction.
I don't think there's a distinction to be made. I think he does see. I think Paul saw Christ on the road to Damascus.
Well,
And I don't think anybody next to him saw it.
but it says it's in their mind. Look at section 110, verse 1. Our minds were open.
That's right.
And the understanding of our minds were open. It's all about the mind. It's not about the eyes. It's spiritualized. It's the eye of faith. So it's second sight. It's the eyes of our understanding.
That's your conclusion.
So, oh, that's what section 76 says. That's what section 110 says. That's what the numerous statements by the witnesses. That's why Martin Harris is saying none of the witnesses saw the physical plates. They saw them like an eye, like imagining.
I think you go from generalities to specifics entirely.
Well, we don't have much time.
Well, it doesn't give you license to veer off of what is legitimate.
Just to put this to bed before we move on to the Book of Mormon, your understanding is that the people who were saying that Joseph Smith was accepting money for seeking out treasure that was never found, that they're not reliable. But then you admit that Orson Pratt says that there's a treasury of records that has been seen, but they were not necessarily. Just how do you reconcile? I mean, he sees them and says they're in that hill, but
I reconcile it the same way that I see Jacob saw the ladder going to heaven, and angels descending and ascending. He saw something.
But he's making the claim that there are physical objects in a hill, as opposed to a vision of God sitting on his throne, his train filling the temple, and the angels.
That distinction.
Well, what I did
What
for
I
it.
say is that Joseph Smith saw a vision. He and Oliver Cowdery saw a vision, walked into what they perceived was the hill. I don't think it's any different than any other vision that you see recounted in the Old Testament or the New.
So did they lay the plates on a physical table? Did they see the sword of Laban? Did they see a messenger there? Did he see a room full of records?
That's what they said.
Yeah, this strikes me as second sight.
Let's move on to the Book of Mormon. So Joseph Smith, he is understood to be taking money under false pretenses by many of his neighbors. So, be slow. I'll get to it. But he is understood to be taking money under false pretenses by his neighbors, saying that
he's claimed to it. I'm not saying it's understood. I'm saying that some of his neighbors that did not support him made those claims. Those who did support him did not believe it was under false pretenses.
And what I'm saying is his neighbors are understanding this, they're claiming this, and may explain why they were opposed to it. But the issue is that he's claiming to see, according to them, he's claiming to seek treasure that's not there. He's arrested on this. He's using a Seer stone. There's a consulting with. I mean, would you admit that Moroni is not an angel in the same way that the Bible referred to it? He's dead, correct?
No, he was resurrected.
He's resurrected. I mean, this is dead. Isn't this why Joseph Smith is kicked out of the Methodist Church because of charges of necromancy?
No, because he was never a member of the Methodist Church. He was an exhorter.
But he did seek membership.
That's a claim,
but the claim is that there were people. His name was put forward. There were people who said we opposed him because he was a necromancer.
yeah, I'm familiar with the account, but I think it's a bit of a leap to say that he was a member of the Methodist Church.
Where in the Bible do you find this kind of seer stone, this kind of necromancy?
Well, I don't consider it necromancy, so
Well,
it asks me to support something that I don't believe is.
Okay, I'm using that term.
Well,
Where
Isaiah says don't use peach stones, and that's what he's involved in.
He doesn't
Dealing
say
with
peach stones,
command.
he says don't seek those who keep in mud. He doesn't say peach stones.
Well, okay,
Don't wear them, you'll.
don't go to mediums.
That's true.
Familiar spirits, which is a dead person, you're trying to contact them.
I mean, how do you see this as different from Saul seeking to consult with Samuel through the witch of Endor?
I don't think that Joseph Smith sought to contact a departed spirit. An angel came to him, and from the LDS perspective, angels are either spirits who have lived on this earth, or who have been resurrected, or who have been translated, or who will yet be born.
So the LDS understanding would be we're not to we're strictly forbidden from seeking counsel from the dead, but if the dead come to us, we can receive their counsel.
Yeah, I think that's what happened. The dead came to the resurrected Lord came to Peter. That's a pretty good indication. Someone who was dead and then resurrected and came and gave counsel.
There's a different, we see a difference in terms of resurrection. Christ is physically resurrected.
Well, we believe that God is physically resurrected.
Okay,
But the early accounts don't have him resurrected. This isn't involved.
Which early accounts specify that he wasn't resurrected?
didn't some others say that it was a spirit who appeared to him?
Yeah, there's no scripture quoting in the early things. There's no. He's just more the spirit guardian. It's also not true. He's not resurrected.
Probably using a little more confident than Joseph.
No. In chapter 5 of my book, it gets into that.
I read the book.
Let's move on to the Book of Mormon. Do you admit that the plates were not necessary to Joseph Smith's translation work?
Do I have to agree or can I just agree?
Well,
Because when I'm asked to admit, it's implying that there's something nefarious here.
let me try to phrase it in a kind of gentler fashion.
Do
We agree that the plates were not physically present for at least large portions of Joseph Smith's translation work? It was him
Absolutely.
and Emma with the hat and a stop and the rock from the bottom.
And I think if you were in my instrument class when we talk about this, I would say that it was very clear after the translation of the Book of Lehi that Joseph Smith realized that he didn't have to have the physical object there. He never claimed to have the writings of John. He claimed to translate what John had written on a papyrus, but he never claimed to have that actual document in his hands.
Why did he ever need a prophet?
I personally believe, this is Alan, not necessarily an institute teacher, but I think that it helped give him faith. That he needed.
All he's got to do is put the glasses on and he can look and see and read.
I still think it has to work through faith. I don't think it isn't like an iPod when you just turn it on. It still has
That's what Mosiah says.
No, it doesn't.
And it doesn't say that. If a person is
When
like
I challenged you on that, you said it was a Messiah, and we found out it wasn't Messiah. The second week, when it was talking about the Leon.
where does it say faith is necessary? All. We got a lot of questions when we get to it.
Yeah, a couple of things. Why, from your perspective, why would Joseph, who still had the stone, not use it to translate the book of Abraham?
Because he was after 1830. He didn't use the stone after 1830.
That's true.
But he still possessed it, right? So, I mean, he has the stone that supposedly allowed him to translate Egyptian in the Book of Mormon. But then he has Egyptian papyri in front of him, and he has to, he spends all this time, he has the Egyptian grammar, things like this. I'm curious as an outsider, I mean, the Book of Abraham has all kinds of issues anyway, but, I mean, when the papyri resurfaced, it's striking to me that one of the claims of the current prophet is that he is prophet, seer, revelator. He has the gift to translate. Why is it that when the papyri resurfaced back in 67, that Nibley basically admitted he had to stall for a year so he could learn to read hieroglyphics? I mean, why didn't the prophets simply read those?
Because I don't think the papyri was over there.
But why is it that they published it on the front of what was then the improvement era and said that the papyri had been...
The papyri had been found. The papyri,
and
they were a part of the church history.
But I mean, couldn't the prophet have looked at it and said, "Oh no, this is something totally unrelated"?
I mentioned he might have. I don't think that's the way God works, though. I don't think that the papyri were for scripture. I mean, it's. I don't think there was any need to do that.
But I mean, isn't?
I thought we were going to do that.
Yeah, but it ties in. The church has had this same seer stone and not used it to interpret the Book of Abraham before, back when it was first purchased, or when it resurfaced back in '67. And it's kind of striking that if this is a gift, that this stone has the power to do that.
I think the stone has the power.
Well, remember, Martin Harris said he switched this stone for one like it, and Joseph looked into his hat and said, "As dark as all Egypt." So, I mean, there's some idea that there's a combination of prophetic gift and a seer stone.
I think Smith did his stone well enough. He's playing games with Harris myself.
I would agree, but I mean, anyway, it's striking to me that.
I think you probably have to ask one of the churches. That's above my pay grade.
But they don't answer questions.
We're from a company.
He's been dead for 25 years.
Thomas Watson. I asked Thomas Watson a question. Well, I guess it's been about 6 years.
We'll give you a list.
Yes.
All right,
So they discourage people from asking, as you know.
Actually, yeah, they do, because they don't have the time to answer. It's kind of like the Moses principle. Moses learned to set up judges and only handle the big cases. If you went to your state president, well, you're a member, and asked him questions that he didn't have an answer, he would move over the line. It would go to the problem.
That's the idea, yes.
I've seen it work.
Doesn't usually.
Or moving around.
if you haven't figured out,
I'm talking about some specific cases I know of.
if you haven't figured out,
He knows about it.
we're doing this a little more informally this evening. So we got a list of questions here. I wanted to ask, are there any, are y'all fine with the questions, or is there business that y'all? Okay.
That's 8:30.
All right, so if you've got questions, please bring them up.
You're right here. Hold on.
I'm getting. run with plates, it's hard for me to get up out of chairs sometimes. All right. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm having to quickly look at some of this is a question for you. The gentleman says, I was an adult convert to the LDS Church. I was a member for less than 2 years. I have never heard of the Seer stone or the rock in the hat translation, not once. Was it my fault that I didn't know?
Yes. I mean, who is supposed to teach you?
You're a victim blamer.
Is somebody supposed to sit you down and say, these are all of the nuances of church history?
They're not hard. This is not any ordinary artifact. This is the stone that was used to translate the entire current Book of Mormon in the first 18 sections.
I think I was a member of the church
I think that's pretty
for well over 20 years before
I think it's a significant artifact.
but it was my fault. I mean, I probably could have learned about it by the time I was 15 or 16 if I had an interest in it.
Well, if you want to plow through all those ancient esoteric lore, I suppose you're right, but many LDS people didn't even know Joseph Smith was a polygamist.
I know that was the next thing I was going to say. It's interesting. I knew he was polygamous because all of my uncles were polygamists, and they made a big deal of that.
Richard Bushman, this was not taught in the Mormon Sunday school or preached in or in society.
Well, he was polygamous.
That's what I'm talking about, polygamy.
Well, if you understood the million, why not? We got a lot of grief, even after we stopped polygamy, if we mentioned it.
I understand that.
And when you mention it, and it hits the front page of the newspaper, the church quits mentioning it because it isn't essential.
So why are they coming forth now? Because of their goodwill or because of the internet?
People are concerned about it.
I'm sorry, Alma, but the last words my father said when he left my house for the last time was, "Get me out of the apostate's house." And it was 2001 when I started to find out about this stuff. The problem is my father didn't live long enough to see that damn picture of the rock because he didn't believe me. He believed you guys. And he jettisoned me before you guys. So don't go tell me it's my fault or anybody else's fault. I'm sorry.
I'll say one more thing. By you claiming that it's our fault, you're a victim blamer.
Excuse me.
You are a victim blamer
Everyone, I appreciate
because
that most
historians and
people right
scholars have not measured up to the
Excuse me, everyone.
responsibility.
Please, there are a whole lot of people on both sides of this that don't want to see this kind of thing take place. It's easy for each side to play victims. It's easy for each side to. There are people who hate me. I've been called things this week I can't even repeat. By people who said I wasn't loving enough in telling me things, in describing me as in ways I can't repeat. But, folks, truth matters. That's why we're here. And let me tell you, I've had the privilege of interviewing Alma somewhere between 12 and 14 times. I disagree radically with him. We've had discussions about who is God, who is man, what is sin, who is Jesus Christ, what is salvation. Let me please press upon you. No one should have anything to fear from truth. And yes, there's been pain, there's been heartache, and I'm not trying to diminish that in any way. But if we're going to have a dialogue where the truth gets put out in the open and everybody can see it and make an informed decision, I don't know a better way than doing this. So please, let's not undermine that. This question's for you, and I'm gonna have to, I'm sorry, I'm looking,
Okay, sorry.
no, that'd be y'all.
That was all y'all.
No, that's a big group. Second person four. No, this is you singular Grant. Since you weren't alive in the 1800s, isn't everything in your book things out of your mind's eye?
This person doesn't believe we can know anything. Next.
For Alma, Joseph's application to become a member of the Methodist Church is mentioned in the Methodist District Minutes, 1828. Why did Joseph seek membership in the Methodist Church after the 1821 vision in 1828 if all Christian religions were wrong and their creeds abominable?
I thought we already answered that. It's been a while since I've read the account, but I don't believe that he sought membership. I know he was
I
exhorted.
read them in the minutes, in the district.
Send me the information on that, because I haven't seen it. I'm sorry.
It's there, and I'd like to answer my question. Why would he ask for membership in a church that he claimed was abominable?
Okay, my answer to you is I don't believe you. I'm sorry. I've searched records. I've spent months and months reading through records, and I haven't come across that. If you can get me the source, I'd be glad to consider it. But I'm not going to answer a hypothetical. What I consider a hypothetical.
Okay.
I think there's an in-between position. Joseph, in order to join the Episcopal Methodist Church in those days, you had to start something to do with Sunday school. You had to be accepted into. It was like step one. You weren't actually joining the church at that point. You were petitioning to start the process. And Joseph may have done it for Emma, for all I know, who was Methodist. But her in-laws, the Lewises, Daniel Lewis and others, talk about this first step. So technically, no, he's not joining the church. He didn't even get that far. They just says, we don't want you.
Because one of the council members of that district knew of Joseph Smith's shenanigans,
Right.
and he said, no, we will not allow him in.
Yeah.
But why would he seek membership? That's my question.
Yeah, that's the question.
All right. Next question is for Grant. Are you familiar with a recent publication from Darkness into Light, which deals with the stones primarily? It says you can buy it as a written books. It shows pictures of the stones and quotes of those who saw Joseph using the stones. Is it possible that this book and the stone photos is the new church? In the new church museum are damage control?
No, I don't know. I'm not familiar with that book. I've heard the title, but I really can't comment on it. I can't read their motivations.
This is for Alma. Mr. Allred, CES Sunday School curriculum shows Joseph translating from plates, not the Seer stone. It is well known throughout the church that the stone showed the correct translation. If Joseph mistranslated, he couldn't go further with the translation until he recorded it correctly.
I think the second paragraph is faulty. That was a claim made by either Martin Harris or David Whitmer. I can't remember which one.
Did Emma also do it?
Well, make the claim that he could only proceed if it was correct.
Didn't she claim that if she misspelled a word that he couldn't proceed?
I'm not aware of her making that claim, and that isn't consistent with the manuscripts. There were manuscripts where I think, as I remember specifically, the name Coriantumor, that Ulrich had tried it 3 times, and for the 3rd time I think he underlined it when he got this correct spelling. But a lot of people made claims for how the translation took place, but there were only 2 people who tried to translate it, and that was Joseph and Oliver, and neither of them provided an account of how it occurred. In Nauvoo, Hiram invited Joseph to stand up and explain to the members how the translation took place, and he announced that was not to go to the world. So my perspective is that those who claimed they knew didn't know. Those
Okay.
Oh, and the other element. I think it's kind of a romanticized thing. For me, it's the same thing as having Nephi Schwarzenegger in the pictures. People like to see it, on the Jaguars in front of Noah. I don't think
that was my question. I taught Sunday school. I taught a lot. I taught by that picture right there, and it's not true. I taught hundreds of children.
Well, the thing is, I don't think that's a lie if you're talking about the book of Lehi. Joseph Smith started the translation. In fact,
We don't have that.
yeah, well, you're right. But when you go through the church history accounts, you see the screen that was between Joseph and Martin Harris. There wasn't a screen between between Oliver Cowdery and the other scribes.
You're just digging a hole deeper for yourself. Then we don't have the book of Lehi. We taught this way. Evidently, he didn't translate that way for the rest of the Book of Mormon.
All right. Quick follow-up, a related question. Do you believe that the church should commission artwork to show the actual process of translation?
No, I would like that.
Yeah, this article doesn't have him
Look, get a better painter than that.
Yeah, and that's not quite right anyway. Not quite. It was a top hat, and he had his elbows like this. At least the two people that I quoted that saw him do it.
Yeah, well, there were quite a few people who saw him do it. I think that's undisputed. No question about it.
Right, but we tried to be accurate when he did. The point is that they didn't bother to put that in the article. It seemed to me that would have been important or nice.
I read the article.
It does not show Joseph using the stone.
They don't put it in the historical museum, they just put it on the Seer stone. They don't talk about this.
Okay.
In the museum, that's
Grant, next question for you. What ultimately led you to leave the LDS Church?
Reading my book.
Answer the question.
Let's see. All the ones left are for you, so I'm trying to pick the best one to balance it out here.
Yes, no, yes, yes.
A couple of questions.
You can do our car now.
I have a hard enough
It's
time.
new day.
I have a hard enough time weighing things straight. Two related questions. I'm just going to paraphrase them. If the church leaders have known of the Seer stone for so long, why is it the curriculum hasn't changed? Why is it it's only now that it's coming out?
Good question. I don't know. What I can say is I've been teaching at the Institute of Religion for, I think, 25 years now. And I've been teaching that the whole time.
And I'll ask one more here that's touched on, but what do you see as the real purpose of the gold plates, since they were not required for the translation?
I think there are a couple of purposes. I think there's something important about keeping records. People will judge from the records that were kept. I think the reason they were given to Joseph Smith was to give him faith. I think after a while he realized that he didn't need them. And after a while he realized he didn't need the Seer stone.
I want to be fair on this. There's one question I got. Van's with us this evening. I listened to the show last night. Van Hale is with us. And
Van, I didn't recognize you. Wow. You've gone gray like me.
We look like good.
James White says that you look like one of the 3D fights. Yeah. Anyway, one of the questions last night was, does God know the future? And to me, this whole view of seer stones and this kind of translation, all that, it goes to the heart of who is God. Do you recognize, our understanding of the Bible is that you have an infinite, eternal, holy God who is sovereign over everything. The question last night was, can God change? And it appeals to God dealing with Moses in the wilderness, seeking destroying. It just sounds like there's a view of God who can be manipulated and can be changed, that he hasn't always been God. He's a man who has been exalted to Godhood, and that we're really dealing not just with the trappings, but we're really dealing with a fundamentally different God. One, from the historic Orthodox position, one God who's always been God. There are no other gods. They exist eternally in three persons. So it's not the Father, the Son, and the Spirit are simply roles that are being played. It's not modalism. But a God who's always been a God, who speaks infallibly, that when he gives prophecy, the word of God cannot be broken, versus a God who is one of the many gods, who hasn't always been God, and may not know the future. And I mean, do you recognize that? Would you agree that we're talking that Joseph Smith and historic Orthodox Christianity are not just differing on the peripherals? It's a different God, a different gospel.
Absolutely. Well, I would say it's a completely different concept of God. I think that you can create your concept of God and he will answer your prayers, even though it's a false concept.
But would you go so far as to say that those who are trying to find some rapprochement and let's all just play nice, we're not talking about the same God, the same gospel, are we? Thank you.
We are diametrically different
and I appreciate
in what Scripture means, who God is, who Christ is,
I think that's
what
a better
sin is.
Honestly, I think that's a better answer than a lot of evangelicals give. But at any rate, thank you. Please. I picked on you here at the end.
Yeah, there's one thing that keeps coming to my mind, and that is the nature of God and the nature of prophecy. And I just read this last week in the Chronicles, where Isaiah comes in to Hezekiah. Hezekiah is sick unto death. He says, "You're not going to recover from this illness. You're going to die. Thus saith the Lord." I mean, he's giving him a prophecy, and then he leaves. Hezekiah falls down on his knees and asks God for more time. God comes to Isaiah and says, "Go back and tell him he's got 15 more years."
In 3 days, then it will be destroyed.
Yeah, I mean there are
except they repent.
Yeah. Well, the thing is did God not know that Hezekiah was going to repent?
I would love to flesh it out in the next discussion, and hopefully we can have you back. Well, folks, it is a privilege. I don't know if you know how rare it is to get two folks as qualified as this together and discuss these things. You can ask afterwards. We're going to be sticking around. But please take the opportunity to thank both our speakers for being very gracious to come here free of charge. I'm Scottish. Count your blessing. Anyway, well, thank you very much for being with us. If you do have questions, I think I'm planning on sticking around for a few minutes. And if you're looking for a church that believes that truth matters, that holds the historic faith,
And if you're under 30, come to Westminster.
Christ Presbyterian Church, Magna, Utah, Magna Main Street, Sunday mornings, 11 o'clock. Come see us.
Thank you.